Ladies and gentlemen, today I stand before you to honor a group of women who are not defined by how small they can make themselves, but by how boldly they show up, speak out, and stand tall. These are the women who don't apologize for their strength. There is a lie being sold to women everywhere today, and it is wrapped in flattery and marketed as humility. That lie says if you're really kind, you'll always be available. If you're really good, you'll say yes. If you're truly strong, you can carry everything. But I want to say this as clearly as I can. Being constantly available to everyone is not Christ-like, it's idolatry. It puts people in the place of God and makes approval the goal instead of obedience. A woman who is truly strong understands that she is not required to sacrifice her soul on the altar of people's expectations. She doesn't say yes just to keep the peace. She says yes when God tells her to and no when that's the most obedient answer. And don't get me wrong, this kind of boundary setting is not easy. It's not a power move, it's a spiritual discipline. It's a moment-by-moment decision to fear God more than people. It takes courage to say, I won't be part of that conversation. I won't bend my values to fit into this group. I won't let that relationship continue if it constantly drains the life out of me. Some may call it cold, others may call it pride, but God calls it wisdom. And wisdom, real biblical wisdom, is costly. It will cost you popularity. It may cost you some relation, but it will never cost you your soul. Women who walk in this kind of strength have often learned it the hard way. They've walked through seasons where they said yes to everything and everyone, only to find themselves burnt out, anxious, and distant from God. They've felt the sting of betrayal from people they bent over backwards to please, and they've reached that sacred moment, sometimes through tears, when they realize that peace with God is worth more than the applause of the crowd. It's from that place that strength is born, not in arrogance, not in isolation, but in the quiet, holy realization that your life was never meant to revolve around keeping everyone else happy. You see, boundaries are not walls, they are gates. And gates don't just keep things out, they allow the right things in. A woman of strength is not hard heart, she's discerning. She doesn't build her life around the loudest voices in the room. She listens to the still, small voice of God, and she organizes her life around His truth. That's why she can walk away from toxic relationships. That's why she can turn down that opportunity that everyone says is amazing, but she knows will cost her too much. That's why she can endure being misunderstood without rushing to explain herself. She doesn't need to be understood by everyone. She just needs to be faithful to the one who called her. And let me tell you, there is beauty in that kind of freedom. There is a calmness, a steadiness that marks a woman who has been delivered from the bondage of needing constant affirmation. She's not ruled by guilt when she says no. She's not weighed down by the opinions of others. And she's not crushed when people walk away. Why? Because her strength isn't rooted in being everything to everyone. It's rooted in being obedient to God. That's where her confidence comes from. That's what keeps her grounded when the storms come, and they will come. The world tells women, be strong, be fierce, chase your dreams, but the moment they draw a line, the world calls them selfish. Let's be honest, it's not strength the world hates. It's conviction. It's not ambition. It resents. It's holiness. Because the kind of strength I'm talking about doesn't just set boundaries to protect a schedule. It sets them to protect a heart that belongs to Christ. It says, I can't afford to be entangled in every drama, every crisis, every false responsibility, because I've been called to walk a narrow path, and that path is costly. Some of the most powerful women I've ever seen aren't the ones standing on stages or leading big movements. They're the ones who quietly decided they won't be manipulated anymore. They're the ones who chose to raise their children with intention, even when the world mocked them for not chasing more. They're the ones who cut off a toxic friendship, refused to compromise their values, or walked away from a job that crushed their spirit. And they didn't do it because they were proud. They did it because they finally realized their worth isn't negotiable. Now hear me, this isn't an excuse to become cold or distant or defensive. Strength without love is just noise. But love without boundaries is chaos. And the women who walk this balance understand that truth. They are gracious, but not gullible. They are patient, but not passive. They forgive, but they do not forget who God has called them to be. They can serve without being enslaved. They can give without being emptied. And they can love without losing them. So if you're listening to this, and you've been made to feel guilty for being firm, for saying no, for stepping back, for walking away from something that dishonors God, I want you to know you are not weak. You are not broken. You are not rebellious. You are strong. You are wise. You are protecting something sacred, and you do not need to apologize for that. Let the world misunderstand you. Let them call you names. Let them walk away. But you keep standing, keep obeying, keep protecting the strength God has placed inside of you. Because strength like that doesn't just survive, it multiplies. ChatGPT said, there's something sacred about a woman who has found her voice. I'm not talking about the one she uses just to get through the day, to answer the phone, to keep the peace at work, or to say the things others want her to say. I'm talking about her true voice, the one shaped by conviction, forged in struggle, and anchored in the fear of the Lord. The kind of voice that doesn't tremble when the world stares back in disapproval. The kind of voice that no longer seeks permission to be heard. Women who do not apologize for their strength have learned a lesson that many never do. You don't need to be loud to be powerful, but you must be clear. You must know who you are not, and what you've been put here to do. Clarity is strength, and strength, when it comes from God, produces a voice that echoes in eternity. These women understand that the call of God on their lives doesn't come with a disclaimer. It's not something they have to hide or tone down so others feel more comfortable. They don't speak to offend, but they're also not afraid of the offense that truth may bring. In a world where women are constantly being told to perform, to shrink, to blend in, or to shout just to be noticed, these women make a different choice. They choose to speak with courage, not volume. They don't yell to be heard. They live in such a way that their presence cannot be ignored. And when they do speak, it isn't to win arguments or gain applause. It's because truth compels them. They have been entrusted with something holy, God's truth alive in them, and they will not silence that for anyone. You see, strength doesn't ask, will they accept? It asks, is what I'm about to say aligned with the truth of God's word? That's the difference. Weakness seeks validation. Strength seeks righteousness. And that's why their voice carries weight, because it's not rooted in pride or performance. It's rooted in a deep, abiding intimacy with Christ. That intimacy births clarity. That clarity gives them courage. And that courage gives them a voice that speaks when it matters most. I've seen this kind of strength in women who for years felt invisible, too afraid to speak their hearts, too uncertain of their worth. But when the Holy Spirit begins to stir in a heart that has been silenced for too long, something powerful happens. That woman begins to realize that she doesn't need the world's permission to step into what God has called her to. She begins to understand that silence in the face of lies is not humility, it's surrender, and she refuses to surrender anymore. Some people will say, she's changed, and they're right, she has. She's no longer shaped by fear. She's no longer motivated by acceptance. She's no longer willing to be anyone but exactly who God made her to be. And the truth is, not everyone can handle that kind of clarity. When you stop watering yourself down, the people who depended on your silence to stay comfortable will start to get nervous. But that's not your problem. Your job is not to make everyone feel good about your growth. Your job is to obey. When a woman walks in this kind of truth, she doesn't speak just to be seen. She doesn't throw around her opinions like grenades. No, she's learned the value of restraint. She speaks less often, but with more purpose. And when she does speak, people listen, not because she's the loudest, but because her words are anchored in something deeper than self-interest. She's not just adding to the noise, she's delivering truth with the weight of conviction behind it. And hear me, this voice isn't always welcomed. Sometimes it will cost her friends. It will make her unpopular. It will label her as difficult or intimidating or too intense, but she doesn't flinch because she knows what's at stake. She knows that her silence will never serve the king. She knows that when God puts fire in your bones, you don't hide the flame. You let it burn. You let it expose. You let it refine. You let it shine. This kind of strength is not natural. It's what happens when a woman has spent enough time in the secret place to stop caring about the spotlight. It's what happens when she's died to the need to be liked, and now she just wants to be obedient, and that obedience frees It gives her the authority to speak in places she once felt unqualified. It gives her the peace to stay silent when others clamor for attention, and it gives her the discernment to know the difference. She no longer feels the need to convince. She no longer exhausts herself trying to explain what God has already made clear to her. If you understand, good. If you don't, that's okay too. She doesn't speak for applause. She speaks because she has something worth saying, and she's not afraid to say it. And don't mistake this clarity for coldness. The strongest women are also the most tender. Why? Because they've been through the fire. They've wrestled with God in the night. They've wept in prayer. They've battled fear and insecurity and shins. They've had seasons where they had no voice, where they were talked over, dismissed, misunderstood. But instead of letting that make them bitter, they let it make them bold, not with arrogance, but with holy resolve. They now carry their voice like a sword, not a dagger, not to wound, but to protect, to cut through confusion, to bring clarity where there's chaos. They speak not to elevate themselves, but to lift others higher, to remind them of what's true, what's right, and what's eternal. And maybe that's where real strength comes from, not from the ability to dominate a room, but from the willingness to speak truth when it would be easier to stay silent, from the choice to rise when staying small would be more convenient, from the unshakable confidence that God is with her even when everyone else walks away. Let me tell you something that will make the room a little quieter, because truth tends to do that. There is no glory in hiding what God has given you. There is no righteousness in pretending you're smaller than you are, just so others can feel bigger. And there is no humility in shrinking back when God has called you to stand tall. Women who don't apologize for their strength have learned, sometimes through pain, sometimes through rejection, that dimming their light doesn't serve anyone. It only delays what heaven was trying to accomplish through them. You see, the world has a strange way of treating women. It tells them to be strong, but not too strong, to be confident, but not too confident, to speak up, but not so loudly that anyone feels uncomfortable. It praises women who are silent when they should speak, passive when they should lead, and self-erasing when they should be standing with boldness. But there comes a moment by the grace of God when a woman says, no more hiding, no more shrink, no more apologizing for the way I was created. And when that moment comes, something shifts. She begins to walk differently. She begins to talk differently. She stops second guessing every step she takes. She stops twisting herself into a shape that others find more palatable. She steps into rooms with the quiet knowledge that she belongs, not because others say so, but because God has placed her there. She doesn't ask, am I too much? She asks, am I being faithful? Because that's the only question that matters. This kind of woman no longer makes herself smaller to protect the insecurities of others. She doesn't hide her wisdom so others won't feel out of place. She doesn't dull her fire because someone else is uncomfortable in the light. No, she burns, she shines, not for her own glory, but because light was made to shine, salt was made to season, and strength was never meant to be buried. And let me be clear, this isn't about ego. This isn't about pride. This is about stewardship. It's about honoring the God who put that light in you in the first place. When God gives you gifts, whether it's leadership, discernment, insight, compassion, creativity, He does not expect you to bury them in the ground and hand them back to Him unused. There will be a day when you stand before the throne and give an account, not for how small you played it, but for whether you walked in obedience to what He gave you. That's what strong women understand. That's why they refuse to shrink, because they know what it cost to find their light. They know what it cost to speak the truth. They've spent too many years quieting their voice for the comfort of people who never cared about their calling. They've lost time trying to fit into molds they were never meant to fit into. And now they've decided that they're done apologizing for showing up fully, and it will make people uncomfortable. Don't think for a second it won't. There will be whispers. There will be labels. She's too much. She thinks she knows everything. She's trying to take over. But the truth is, people who are still living small will always feel threatened by someone who stepped into their full frame. That's not your concern. That's not your assignment. You don't owe them an explanation for your obedience. You don't owe them a watered down version of who you are just to make peace. The peace of man is a poor substitute for the favor of God. Strong women also know when to stop apologizing for things that were never wrong to begin with. Apologizing for being passionate, apologizing for having high standards, apologizing for caring deeply, dreaming boldly, or saying something that needed to be said. They've learned the hard way that you can apologize your way right out of your purpose. And so they've stopped, not because they're rebellious, but because they're finally free. This strength doesn't show up all at once. It grows. It grows in silence. It grows in disappointment. It grows in wilderness seasons where she wonders if anyone sees her at all. And when it finally rises to the surface, it doesn't come out flashy. It comes out steady. It comes out clear. It comes out holy. It comes out with the kind of confidence that doesn't need to shout because it knows who it is and where it's going. Now, if you're a woman who's been told you're too much, too intense, too direct, too passionate, listen carefully. You are not too much. You are exactly enough for the assignment God has given you. And if people can't handle your presence, your clarity, your calling, that's not your burden to carry. You were not created to live in fragments. You were not made to tiptoe around other people's comfort zones. You were made to walk in fullness, and fullness does not apologize for being whole. Let the world adjust. Let them say what they will. You were not created to be understood by everyone. You were created to be faithful to God, and faithfulness requires fullness. It requires courage. It requires that you stop apologizing for being the woman God has called you to be. So when you walk into a room, walk in like God sent you, not because you're better than anyone else, but because you know your light has a purpose. Walk in and speak when the Spirit prompts. Lead when God tells you to lead. Step forward when others hesitate. Shine, not to be seen, but because you can no longer hide what God has done in you. And if that light offends someone, so be it. If it challenges them, praise God. If it disrupts the status quo, let it. You were not called to blend in. You were called to stand apart. So stop apologizing, stop shrinking, stop second-guessing every step, and for the love of God, let your light shine. There's a quiet strength in a woman who has decided that she will no longer let insecurity be her master. You can see it in the way she carries herself, in the way she moves through the world, not with arrogance, but with an unshakable assurance that she no longer needs to perform for anyone. Women like this have made peace with the fact that they are not everyone's cup of tea, and they are no longer controlled by the desire to be. They've come to know that their value was never supposed to come from the crowd, and certainly not from comparison. Their value is rooted in the one who formed them. There's something unexplainable that happens when a woman finally chooses to let go of insecurity. It doesn't mean she never feels afraid. It doesn't mean she doesn't wrestle with doubts from time to time. It means she no longer lets those voices make her decisions. It means she's looked insecurity in the eye and said, "You don't get to lead anymore." That's not a loud decision. It's not always visible to everyone. It happens in the small moments when she chooses to show up fully instead of hiding, when she speaks even though her voice trembles, when she stops comparing her journey to someone else's highlight reel. It's easy to underestimate just how much strength it takes to walk in confidence in a world built to make women doubt themselves. From the time they are young, they're told who they should be, what they should look like, how they should talk, what they should want. The pressure is subtle sometimes, and other times it's crushing. So when a woman finally breaks free from that mold and chooses to love what God created in her, it is not weakness, it is she's fighting 1,000 lies she has believed about herself and choosing instead to believe what God has said, and that kind of woman is dangerous to darkness, because the moment she stops obsessing over who she isn't, she becomes fully available for who God has made her to be. She stops wasting time in the pit of comparison, jealousy, and fear. She starts to see the beauty of her own assignment, and she runs in her own lane with freedom. That's what insecurity steals. It doesn't just rob us of joy, it robs us of time, of presence, of focus. But confidence, godly, spirit-born confidence, restores that. It redeems it. Now, let me be clear, the kind of confidence I'm talking about isn't self-made. It's not something you can generate by repeating affirmations in the mirror or following self-help gurus. This isn't about telling yourself you're enough. It's about knowing that He is. You can't uproot insecurity by inflating your ego. You uproot insecurity by anchoring your identity in the one who never changes. Because the truth is, you and I will change. Our gifts will seasons will come and go, but the one who called us, He remains the same, and He doesn't make mistakes. A woman who walks in this truth isn't rattled by someone else's success. She doesn't need to compete because she understands that the kingdom of God is not a zero-sum game. Someone else's light doesn't dim hers. Someone else's calling doesn't threaten hers. She doesn't feel the need to tear others down to feel taller. She builds, she blesses, she lifts, because she knows there's room for everyone at the table God has prepared. She also stops needing applause to keep going. When the insecurities fall away, so does the addiction to approval. She no longer bends to every opinion or adjusts herself to fit into every room. That doesn't mean she becomes cold or distant. No, she becomes focused. She's no longer scattered by the need to be liked. She's not chasing compliments or obsessed with feedback. Her aim has narrowed. Her vision has sharpened. She has decided that if God is pleased, that is enough. You can't intimidate a woman who has made peace with who she. You can't control her with silence, with gossip, with exclusion. She's not driven by the need to fit in anymore. She's driven by the call to be faithful. And faithful people always look out of place in a culture obsessed with popularity. That's why a woman who has killed insecurity stands out, not because she's flashy or loud, but because she's free, and freedom is always noticeable. That kind of woman also walks differently in her relationships. She no longer needs to manipulate or perform to earn love. She doesn't tolerate being treated like an afterthought or a convenience. She knows her worth, so she sets her standards high, not out of pride, but out of purpose. She refuses to partner with anyone who cannot honor what God is doing in her life. That means she may walk alone for seasons. That means she may lose friendships that were built on insecurity and not truth. But she's okay with that because she would rather be alone and whole than surrounded and broken. She doesn't just dress differently, she discerns differently. She doesn't just speak differently, she thinks differently. She wakes up with purpose and walks with clarity because her mind is no longer occupied with insecurities' lies. She's not wasting emotional energy on am I good enough, or what if they don't like me? She's asking bigger questions now. What is God calling me to do today? Who can I serve? How can I show up with courage and love? That woman becomes a force, not because she's trying to be one, but because that's what happens when someone walks in alignment with heaven. And you know what? That force is not always celebrated. Insecurity is comfortable. It doesn't challenge anyone. It doesn't disrupt. But strength, confidence, rooted in Christ, that challenges the status quo, that makes people nervous. It exposes what's false. And not everyone wants to deal with that. But she's not living for everyone. She's living for one. So if you've been shrinking in your own life, if you've let insecurity speak louder than truth, if you've traded your voice for validation, it's not too late. You can come out of that prison. You can walk in confidence, but it's going to take more than a mindset shift. It's going to take surrender. It's going to take trusting God more than your feelings, more than your fears, more than your doubts. But once you do, once you taste that freedom, you'll never go back. There comes a time when a woman has to decide what voice she's going to listen to,
the voice of culture or the voice of calling, the voice that flatters her pride or the one that calls her to holiness, the voice that tells her to chase comfort or the one that beckons her toward courage. And when a woman finally chooses to be led by purpose instead of pressure, everything changes. She doesn't just live differently, she sees differently. She begins to understand that her life is not about pleasing people, it's about fulfilling a mission. And make no mistake, pressure comes in many forms. It's subtle. It doesn't always come like a wave. It comes like a whisper. The pressure to be perfect, the pressure to look a certain way, the pressure to achieve, to impress, to produce, the pressure to always be available, to never say no, to sacrifice everything, even her soul for the sake of approval. But when a woman decides she is no longer gonna be driven by that pressure, she doesn't just find peace, she finds power. You see, strength is not always about being the loudest in the room. Sometimes strength is about the quiet resolve that says, I will not compromise who I am to fit into a mold I was never made for. A woman who is led by purpose doesn't ask, what will they think of me? She asks, is this what I was made to do? That question changes everything. It changes how she spends her time, who she gives her heart to, and what kind of legacy she builds. Because she's not just trying to survive, she's trying to live on mission. And purpose is not always glamorous. It doesn't always look like stages and spotlights. Sometimes it looks like faithfulness in the unseen, obedience when no one's clapping, prayer in the midnight hour when no one else is listening. A woman led by purpose doesn't need to be seen to be steady. She understands that her worth is not measured in applause, it's measured in alignment. And the most powerful place you can be is not at the center of attention, it's in the center of God's will. That kind of woman is a threat to darkness because she can't be bought. She can't be manipulated by trends or intimidated by opposition. She's grounded, not because she's perfect, but because she's anchored. She doesn't follow the crowd, she follows conviction, and even if that means walking alone, she walks. She doesn't ask for shortcuts, she asks for strength, and God meets her there. Every single time she stops trying to be everywhere, do everything, and please everyone. She's focused now. Her yes is costly, her no is rooted. She's not running in circles trying to prove herself. She's walking in purpose, step by step, one obedient move at a time. And the world may not understand her, that's okay. Purpose doesn't always look impressive to people who are addicted to surface, but she's not building for now, she's building for eternity. There's a fire in her that doesn't come from ambition, it comes from surrender. She's laid her life down, her plans, her timeline, her image, and picked up the cross. That's not weakness, that's authority, the kind of authority that doesn't need to dominate, but cannot be denied. Because when a woman walks in her purpose, she's walking in divine agreement with heaven, and that's not something anyone can take lightly. You know what else changes? Her conversations. She doesn't gossip, she guards her words. She doesn't waste time in meaningless drama. She speaks life. She speaks truth. She doesn't flatter for favor. She corrects in love. Because she's not trying to gain popularity, she's trying to bear fruit. Her words carry weight because her life is aligned. And people can sense that. They may not be able to name it, but they feel it. That's what purpose does. It sets you apart without you ever needing to announce yourself. She's no longer pulled in every direction by the demands of others. She listens to one voice. That doesn't make her rigid. It makes her faithful. It doesn't make her proud. It makes her obedient. And obedience always produces fruit. Even if it takes time, even if no one else sees it yet. She's not moved by results, she's moved by relationship, and that's what keeps her steady when the storms come. And believe me, the storms will come. Purpose doesn't make life easier, it makes it worth it. The woman led by purpose will still face loss, she'll still face betrayal, she'll still face resistance, but she'll stand. Because her foundation is deeper than her feelings. She may cry, she may stumble, but she won't quit. Because this isn't about her reputation, it's about His name, and that's not something she takes lightly. She surrounds herself with people who sharpen her, not flatter her, people who speak truth to her, even when it stings. She's not looking for fans, she's looking for fellow warriors, and when she finds them, she loves them deeply. She pours into them, she walks with them, because she knows that purpose is not meant to be walked out in isolation, it's meant to be lived in community, in covenant, with people who are running the same race. Her time becomes sacred. Her decisions become intentional. She doesn't waste energy on what doesn't matter. She's not trying to build an empire. She's building the kingdom. That's why she refuses to let pressure define her path. She's not here to impress the world. She's here to honor the one who called her. And that's the difference between temporary success and eternal impact. When you meet a woman like this, you'll know, not because she makes it about herself, but because you feel the weight of heaven on her life. You see the fingerprints of grace on everything she touches. You hear the echo of truth in every word she speaks. And you walk away from her, not thinking about how great she is, but about how real God is. So if you've been trying to keep up with the world's pace, trying to meet everyone's expectations, trying to be everything to everyone, let this be your invitation to stop, to breathe, to ask the deeper question, what has God called me to do, and am I walking in that? Because once you know that, once you live from that place, you will no longer bow to pressure, you'll rise in purpose.